Democratic Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs has just introduced legislation aimed at protecting our reproductive health data. Congresswoman, thank you very much for being here. Can you just explain this? I mean, give us a real-world example of how all of our private health data could come back to haunt us, how it could be used against us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as a young woman myself, I use a period tracking app. So let's use that as an example. My period tracking app tells me when I'm supposed to be getting my period and when I'm not. And so you can use that data to see when I am supposed to be pregnant but aren't. And a state attorney general, local law enforcement could use that to prosecute me for potential. There's nothing right now that prevents that data from being shared or sold. And not only about me personally, they can take everyone's data and create a mass surveillance architecture to be able to track people who are traveling out of state, who should be pregnant but aren't, who are searching, as you said, for abortion pills or for clinics or how to get to California, for instance, where I represent. Right now, there are no protections from how that data could be used by law enforcement at the state or local level, or by nonprofit groups like local right-wing nonprofits, small right-wing nonprofit groups who could be buying or getting that data in order to, be able to take part in the bounty law that's part of the Texas anti-abortion legislation.
I mean, Congressman, this sounds so Big Brother. It sounds so Handmaid's Tale. It's just, dystopian, what you're describing. And so you're saying that you believe that tech platforms would hand over information like that to, some sheriff who came calling?
Well, right now, there's no federal prohibition from them doing so. So we know that there are a lot of companies who are saying that they wouldn't, that they are trying to do what they can to protect data, but it shouldn't be up to the goodwill of individual companies. This is some of our most sensitive data, our reproductive and sexual health data, and it's our job as a government to put in place protections at the highest level for that very sensitive data.
What about what we were just talking about, which is the so-called abortion pills? And there have been, the searches for those have been proliferating ever since that draft was released. Can you imagine a scenario where law enforcement demands someone's search history?
Absolutely. Right now, they don't even have to demand it. Of course, they could get a subpoena, a court order, a warrant, but they can also just buy it on the open market.
Meaning what? I mean, just walk us through how that works and how your legislation would stop that.
Yeah. So right now, all of your data that you use from apps, from websites, any data that you generate, there's no prohibition on what can be collected or stored, and there's no prohibition on how it can be shared or sold. So we know that this data is being sold by data brokers directly, by companies. Many of these apps and websites and services, their business model is that they don't charge you anything, but then they use your data and sell it so people can have more targeted advertising, and that's how they make revenue. So what my bill would do is that it would say for anything related to reproductive or sexual health data. So not only about abortion, about fertility tracking, about, if you were Google searching about gonorrhea, all of that would be protected. And the companies could only collect and retain what is strictly necessary for what they need to provide their service. They would not be allowed to sell it at all. They would only be allowed to share it with your express written consent. You have a right to ask for any of your data to be deleted. And if you believe that the FTC is not adequately enforcing this, because, for instance, there could be a Republican president in charge of the FTC who we know would not necessarily faithfully enforce this, you have a private right of action to sue the companies if you believe your data is being misused.
Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs, thank you very much for explaining all of that. Really interesting.